Today is about the victims and survivors of the Highland Park July 4th parade shooting. Our community may never heal from the defendant's calculated and heinous actions that destroyed so many lives. But today is an important step towards justice. Today is about Katie Goldstein, Irina McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, Stephen Strauss, Jackie Sondheim, Nicholas Toledo Zaragoza, and Eduardo Uvaldo, and the 48 others who were physically hurt, who bled, who cried, who may never heal. Today is also about the hundreds who still remember and feel the trauma from that awful day. A day that should have been about celebration and freedom, about returning to normalcy after the pandemic, but became a day of anguish and bloodshed because of this offender's actions. This morning, the shooter in the Highland Park trial pled guilty to 21 counts of first-degree murder and 48 counts of attempted first-degree murder. Let me be clear. This was not a negotiation. This was not a deal. He made a free decision to plead guilty to every single count that this trial team and this law enforcement team was about to present to this jury. He received nothing in exchange for this plea today. We were 1,000% ready to go to trial and to prove him guilty to the jury. We have been working for years to prepare our evidence, which includes DNA testing, fingerprint identification, firearm records, video evidence, identification evidence that put him in the alley walking up to the roof, that put him on the roof, and that had him descending from the roof right after the shooting. We were also prepared to present his voluntary confession that he gave that day to law enforcement. His admissions that he made at that time would have confirmed every piece of physical evidence, trajectory analysis, ballistics reports, DNA conclusions, and eyewitness testimony. The Lake County State's Attorney's Office continues to express its condolences to all who lost a loved one and to all who were so affected physically and psychologically. Our Victim Services Division remains dedicated, even today after this plea of guilty, to every count, to uplifting victims and connecting them to any resources that they may need. Our team is available, ready, and willing to accompany victims through each step as we prepare for sentencing. Our team still stands with you. I want to acknowledge the heroes that day, some of whom are behind me, that ran towards the gunfire. First responders, police, EMTs, fire department professionals, and civilians, community members, residents, regular people, all of whom helped others without hesitating. Their bravery, and their sacrifices stand in stark contrast to the decisions that the defendant made. Every member of law enforcement, the City of Highland Park, thank you, Mayor Rotering, the FBI, the Illinois State Police, the government of Lake County, law enforcement throughout Lake County, and this state's attorney's office has met every moment since 10:14 a.m. on July 4th, 2022. Justice in the legal system does not descend upon a case. It is earned. It comes from the bravery of every victim and every surviving family member who was prepared to come forward in this trial, and they will come forward in this sentencing hearing. It comes from the hours of victim support. Justice comes from the hours of victim support that Highland Park and our federal partners provided to those in need. It comes from victim support professionals and administrative support that hundreds of dedicated government employees have provided to thousands of people in Lake County. It comes from the tireless law enforcement professionals who never stopped to make sure that the truth would reach a courtroom. And the truth reached that courtroom today when he pled guilty. Justice comes from the amazing men and women who stand behind me and were ready to bring justice and truth into this courtroom. I want to specifically thank a few people in my office because it is absolutely necessary. I want to thank Ben Dillon, Jeff Facklam, Lauren Kalsheim-Rothenberg, Eric Collada, Melissa Cisneros, Melissa Burke, Dawn Patch, Jackie Reedy, Jackie Herrera-Hiron, and Vanessa Vargas Ramirez, as well as Jack Metcalf, Lexi Brown, and J.B. Brooks. This team of dedicated professionals was completely ready today and would have gone forward for the next 3 to 5 weeks in bringing this case into the courtroom. This journey will not end for many. We will move next to sentencing and continue to provide support and help for anyone in need. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Rotering, Nancy-Rotering, Mayor of the City of Highland Park. I just want to share that our thoughts and our hearts remain with the families whose loved ones were senselessly taken, those who were injured, and everyone whose lives were forever changed by this horrific act. Today's guilty plea is an important step towards justice, but it does not erase the pain. We share our deep appreciation and admiration for Lake County State's Attorney Eric Rinehart and his entire team for their tireless work to pursue justice on behalf of the Highland Park community. We also express our thanks to the first responders, the law enforcement officers, and the hospital personnel for their professionalism throughout this entire investigation. We are confident in our legal system, and we recognize that there are milestones ahead. We continue to stand together and remain committed to supporting the victims, their families, and our entire community as we move forward together as one Highland Park. Thank you.
Mr. Rinehart, could you talk about how much this caught you by surprise, whether you had any expectation that this might happen today?
We were prepared to present overwhelming evidence of the defendant's guilt. This happens from time to time in our criminal justice system, in big cases and in small cases. As the defendant gets closer and closer to trial, this has happened before. This will happen again in all size of cases, and we were prepared to present all of our evidence.
Well, when did you first get some kind of idea that he was interested in pleading guilty?
We learned this morning.
Did he show any remorse, or did he give any explanation for his decision?
Everything that you saw in the courtroom, Julian, was what happened. I'll let other people characterize that right now. We are going to have a sentencing hearing that will address some of those topics. He answered questions from the judge, and people observed that part of it. I'm not going to characterize him or really think about that.
Can you speak to the mother's outburst in the courtroom? What was she referring to? She said there was some agreement. Is that just
There's no agreement at all. Yes, there is no agreement whatsoever. He pled guilty to every single count. He walked into the courtroom through his attorneys, who are incredibly experienced defense attorneys who have represented him for years. The mother is not a lawyer. She doesn't represent him. We have a justice system that has put lawyers in charge of those matters, and he pled guilty.
What was the deal with the juror this morning?
I'm not going to comment on the juror today.
But did you know at that time when you were dealing with that he was going to change his mind?
We learned this morning from his defense attorneys that was happening. The juror the reason we selected 6 alternates was in case an issue came up with the jury over the weekend, and I'm not going to comment on that.
Mr. Rinehart, can you explain the dropping of charges, the aggravated battery charges, why those were dropped last week?
A few days, last week?
Last week, yes.
So the aggravated battery charges were lesser included. They were the exact same counts as the 48 attempt murder that he pled guilty to today. That each of those cover the attempt murder for the 48 individuals who were hit covered 26 to 50 years. The aggravated battery were the identical victims and were lesser charges. He attempted to murder the people at Port Clinton Square. He attempted to murder the people who were at that parade, and those aggravated battery counts were about a lesser count. It was never going to affect his total time in prison.
But if they were on before and then they were removed, is that just a strategic decision, or why? Just explain for people who don't understand.
Sure, we wanted, yeah, absolutely. There's a mountain of evidence in this case. It was going to be 3 to 5 weeks. With these being lesser charges and being the identical 48 victims as the 48 attempt murder charges, we wanted to present this to the jury and not debate whether shooting somebody is attempt murder. He attempted to murder every single person that he shot at that parade, and those are the top charges, and so they are literally lesser. They are called lesser includeds. Check with all your legal experts. Google lesser includeds.
Mr. Rinehart, can you describe to the witnesses who have been preparing for this day, anxiously awaiting this trial, and now there won't be a trial? Just kind of speak to what's next for them and your involvement with them?
Yeah, since the plea was accepted by Judge Rossetti, we've been meeting with the victims. We will continue to meet with the victims, I assume, over the rest of today, tomorrow, as long as it takes. People are having different reactions. People expected, appropriately, expected to be in trial for the next 3 to 5 weeks. I have not been a victim of shooting. I can't imagine exactly what they were going through, but I've talked to all of them. And everybody is having different reactions. I don't want to really present one overall reaction, but this is a final verdict on 69 counts. Let me be clear. If we had gone all the way to trial, gone through closing arguments, and the jury walked back into the room and delivered 69 counts of guilty, it is the exact same legal effect as when she accepted 69 counts of guilty today. So that has a feeling, I think that is having an impact on people in terms of the timing, but the finality of it is the same, and we didn't just do a trial on those topics. He accepted a guilt, or he pled guilty to all 69 counts, the exact same 69 counts that were about to be presented to the jury. They are the top charges, they are the highest charges, and they cover the years that the court discussed.
Will the survivors get a chance to address him at the sentencing?
Yes, thank you. Good question. We will have a sentencing hearing. I think it's set for April 23rd. I believe she set that as sentencing. There can sometimes be status dates in between. If that were to happen, that's in the normal course of business. At that sentencing hearing, victims and survivors will be able to make what are called victim impact statements, as they are appropriately guaranteed under the Illinois Victims' Rights the Illinois Victims' Bill of Rights, and so they will be able to give statements.
Can you speak to the father's conviction? And a lot of people were disappointed that he was only in jail for a short period of time, but in your opinion, was that a deterrent to other parents across the country who are...
The evidence was going to show that he acquired this weapon in February of 2020. 2.5 years later, 2 years and 4 months later, he engaged in the shooting that he just pled guilty to today. And it is that time frame. You have to have recklessness, which is what the dad's thinking at the time that he helps him get the firearm, and then you have to have something called causation. Please talk to your legal experts and Google causation. You have to have causation and recklessness. The issue in that trial was going to be about those 2.5 years, whether the father was still criminally responsible for that time period. Of course he is, and that's why we charge him with a felony. But you can see in other cases, whether it's Georgia or in Michigan, shorter time frames. So the 2.5 years establishes the absolute, in my opinion, the absolute outside period of criminal liability. Of course, it could be 3 years. I'm not making the legal argument. It establishes the absolute outside of criminal liability. But in Georgia and in Michigan and in other places, you see that condensing, and there is even more responsibility. So I think to tell parents that you will be held criminally responsible for the decisions that you make regarding allowing people to get firearms is a critical thing, and it is a way to begin to solve the problem of gun violence in this country.
Question for the
You were
mayor?
expecting
Yes.
to be here, back in June.
Okay.
Back in June, you were expecting to have a plea, and now you're here today. In the intervening time, is there a sense of, that you are missing that opportunity to make the case in public, in front of the judge, to get jurors to side with you, or how do you feel about the time that and the resources that you have to put towards this?
We were prepared for this trial in so many different ways. We have been working for years to present this. We didn't stop working back in June. We all came back to our office and kept working back then. We've been working ever since then and before that. And obviously, we believe that what we were about to present to the jury was absolutely going to convict him. And I don't think about his decision-making process except to make sure that it followed the rules that the judge wanted to hear.
We're going to
Yep.
allow for Mayor Rotering.
Yep.
If you have questions for Mayor Rotering, State's Attorney Rinehart is going to take a break. If you have questions for Mayor Rotering.
I do have a question. If you could explain what it's like for yourself, but also your community to have, is there any sense of relief or closure today, and what resources are available for folks that might need them now?
Thanks for that question. We continue to provide access to mental health care. That's been a huge priority of ours since this occurred, when 1,200 people were going to get mental health care each day in the aftermath. I think for everybody who came to that parade, they came with different experiences and different emotions. Those who left had different impacts. I think there's a sense of relief that justice has been served. Everybody is eternally grateful to the state's attorney for the incredible work that he and his team have been doing. They've been doing unbelievable work with the victims in terms of providing support services. And I think at this moment, we're all just sort of surprised and relieved that they don't have to experience the unbelievable pain of reliving this experience for the next 3 to 5 weeks. Thank you.
This is a better outcome.
1,000%, absolutely. They were ready. This team had prepared them, and seeing their faces today and the hugs between everybody, it was abundantly clear that they have really been here to support each other, as the city has been as well. And now I think there's a sense of let's continue on our journey and put this behind us.
I was going to ask you, you kind of touched on it a moment ago, but that had to be something a lot of them were dreading, going through that experience, watching it in the trials, seeing the videos, and you touched on the relief, but can you expand on that for a moment?
Well, my understanding is the evidence would have been as horrible as you would imagine the evidence of this kind of crime would have been for those people who experienced it. To have to relive and be re-traumatized, to me, is untenable. And so we're grateful to the state's attorney's office for the incredible work they did that led us to this outcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Eric.
And with that, I think there is a huge collective feeling of relief. Our community wanted justice.
How about you personally? What was going through your mind when they said we haven't changed it?
Just a relief, just an immense amount of relief, just an immense amount of relief for everyone.
Had you been given any information about the prosecutors to this might be coming?
I found out when everyone else found out.
Can you describe how you were impacted, if you're okay with sharing?
My son and I were at the parade and ran for our lives, and it has been a long process to healing. Even when you're not injured, just being at an event like this is life-changing.
SB, is there some sense of relief that you don't have to go through the trial, you don't have to see all that evidence, that it was going to be pretty hard to take?
Yes, I think just knowing that this we can all heal. Our path to healing is beginning.
Ashby, this will be the first 4th of July since this happened that perhaps there is some sense of relief. Walk me through for the community what that might look like in just a few months.
I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I think every moment that we can move forward is a great relief, and thankful to be able to move forward and take our community back on July 4th, be able to celebrate July 4th, and I think we've been trying to do that.
Ashby, can you describe what it was like after court recessed, just among those that came today from Highland Park?
Just a huge sense of relief. Relief and shock, but a lot of relief.
Ashby, did the prosecution team say anything to you after court ended?
No.
And was there any skepticism that you had when he initially said that he was going to plead guilty after what went through last summer?
I think we were all just surprised and just, watching to see what would happen.
Did you kind of hold your breath a little bit with all the questioning the judge was doing?
I held my breath.
Knowing that 6 or 8 months ago, whatever it was, that everybody came to court expecting this plea, then he pulled the rug out. Mm-hmm. Put it in that context of how unpredictable everything has been. I mean, it's got to be a huge shock.
It was a shock to hear the words that he was changing his plea. It was.
Ashby, talk to us about what it's like for yourself, but you've been here this whole time, about what it would have been like to have to go through these 3 to 5 weeks of testimony, hearing the details of this imprisonment.
I think it's an important part of the process, and my hope coming into this was the jury would listen to all of the evidence and find him guilty of this horrible tragedy which he committed, and I'm just relieved that none of us have to go through that.
But you were just here last week. He was in court. There were ample opportunities for things to stop before today. What do you make of the fact that it took up until this moment for this to happen?
I'm not in his head. I have no idea. I have no idea what led to this. Just relieved that it's happened.
And just the impact that it had to be in that to see him for the first time in the courtroom after all these years, what was that like for you? The impact it left on you?
I think every single time I see him, it's it's stressful. I think it's upsetting for everyone in our community, and I think just knowing that this plea has been entered and we will not have to see him again is what we all need to move on.
Well, the trial, there's no trial now, but I know you've been super involved. You've gone to Springfield to advocate for, for the removal of guns, things like that. How do you move forward now? I mean, does this mean that you are done? How do you move forward?
I think it's really important to remember that there were thousands and thousands of people at this parade who ran for their lives, whose children are forever changed, who cannot go on with their daily life, who have spent years in therapy and tried to heal, and that we are not the first community to go through this, and we will not be the last community to go through this. And so while this will fade, not for us, but in the public, it's really important to know that any of us could be any of you, and any family can experience this. And it's on our lawmakers to make changes so that this doesn't happen again to another community. And it's a time for us to hold anyone who commits a mass casualty event to be considered terrorism, and at a federal level have those ability to make that an automatic charge, because thousands and thousands of people were impacted, thousands and thousands of families, and until we start listening and hearing and recognizing that your life can be changed in a moment because we are not passing common sense gun legislation and not giving our prosecutors the right tools to prevent this from happening again, it will keep happening. So I'll keep fighting for that.
Ashley, what have you talked to your son who was with you that day? Have you prepared him for this, for the testimony that's going to be? And how are you communicating with him about what you're anticipating to happen?
I don't talk to him about this. This has been really hard for him, so I haven't told him really anything about it.
Will you tell him something now?
I will tell him now. I will tell him that it's over, and I think he will be very relieved to hear that.
Crimo is not going to be released. He's not going to see the light of day again. But what do you feel like is the most appropriate penalty?
I'm not comfortable making that kind of a statement, but I think that the community is better. Everyone is safer when people like this are not out among us.
Ashby, were you slated to testify at all?
No.
Just leading up to this trial, what was the mood, the energy like in Highland Park, just leading up to today?
I mean, I think we all just wanted it to be over.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'll just make a brief statement. My name is Jennifer McGuffin. I am the Chief Communications Officer at the law firm of Romanucci and Blandon. And along with Everytown Law and the law firm of Paul Weiss, we represent more than 50 survivors, loved ones of the Highland Park tragedy. And as you can see, they have all gone home to process. They each expressed an individual and a collective sense of relief, but today was a very emotional event, and they are all asking for some time and space to come to terms with what happened today, as positive a development as it may have been. They are all committed to pursuing civil justice, and the victims and survivors of the Highland Park tragedy also would like to express their gratitude to the state's attorney's office.
Can you elaborate on the civil, what you meant by civil? Are you getting litigation, or what are they seeking?
We should be issuing a statement from the civil attorneys later in the day, and more details will be coming on that in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Before that, the last part when Jen was speaking, you're working toward civil justice for all.
We are. The victims and the survivors of the Highland Park 4th of July tragedy are intensely relieved at what transpired today in court. They are going home to process. It was a very emotional experience in court this morning. They remain very committed to civil justice and want to express their gratitude to the state's attorney's office for all of their work on this case.
Thank you.
Can you spell your name?
Yes. My name is Jennifer, Jennnifer, last name McGuffin, McGuffin.
Just an additional thought. Was this an important step? Did this have to happen first before you could pursue the civil justice?
I'm going to let the civil attorneys defer to the process and the sequence on that, but I will say that today was a very important step to accomplish. The victims were all looking for some sort of criminal justice in addition to civil.
Has the civil been set yet?